talked about the system for registration in the US being based on pen and paper and stable rural populations. That's something we can relate to because we have that same constraint and we have the same problem in terms of a large number of voters that move, particularly from rural to urban settings. Now, Janaagraha has been arguing that in urban settings, it is not apathy that is the problem, but precisely what we've been talking about, which is problems in the voter lists. And that was demonstrated. I was quite surprised this time, even though I've been engaging with Janaagraha. I was quite surprised to see how right they were proved. Now, you'd think that the constraints we talked about a rural, stable population, wouldn't matter so much in an urban setting because geographically it is more compact, you have more accessible people. But clearly, there is something that needs to change. If the middle classes aren't bothering to go out and vote because of inconvenience, because of having to stand in lines, online voting would be would make a dramatic difference to voter turnouts. Now, I wanted your comments on the experiences that you've had in the US in not just registration, but I know that you've tried in the US also experimenting with online voting, particularly for outstation and military voters.
In very limited cases for military voters and for some of our overseas citizens, what we've allowed is some level of online registration, online voting. Although in most instances, it is really just one step in the process. And so what we allow is we allow the electronic transmission of the ballot to that citizen overseas, to that service member serving in Afghanistan or wherever else they may be stationed. And we're still dependent upon, in most instances, the postal system to return that ballot. And that can be exceptionally problematic because of the delays in transmission. There have been a few jurisdictions which have attempted experiments with internet voting. Maryland is one of the most recent. In Maryland, they put up an online voting system as a test. They put it up several months before an election. And within a day, it had been hacked. And so they took down the online voting system, and they have not proceeded. We have still not addressed the security issues of the internet. We have looked at other systems, kiosk-based systems, which can be protected, where you have a kiosk where you vote, which has a direct connection and doesn't go through the internet. But we still not solved, despite significant efforts, the question of how to, with integrity, get a ballot back from an individual.
You know, if the hacking is possible in actually voting, what about in the registration process? Is that also susceptible? How did Eric succeed in that?
Because of the concern for privacy, there is limited information on our voter rolls. It is your name, your address, your date of birth. But that information is your information, and for those who run our elections, it is their solemn duty to protect that. So actually, when ERIC was developed, it was developed with a very high-level, sophisticated means of anonymization. And so when information is transmitted from the state to ERIC, it is what technologists refer to as one-way hashed. So you will get the date of birth, you will get the address, and when it's transmitted, it in essence is put through a grinder. So everything is scrambled. And it goes to ERIC in that scrambled state. It is never reassembled.
So do you see this as a step process where you say you can't boil the ocean with this one tool in totality, but at least you can take some parts of it, people who do have access, and that lightens the burden on the registration, the maintenance of the rolls, and is that worthwhile then, or is that in your view not a good consideration?
In other countries, cell phones have been used for fairly sensitive transactions like banking, and not just in advanced economies, but in African countries, very widespread, very successfully used. In a country like India, where we have quite a bit of IT expertise, it's actually odd that we haven't yet so far. Regulations have come in the way, But I think we are beginning to solve that. I think there are plans afoot to have large-scale banking access available at the retail level to citizens using cell phone technology.
From the American perspective, has there been any attempt to involve the private sector? And so, for you, is there any scope of us, especially in India, with every single time you move to a different city, chances are you will get a new SIM card. So, do you see any hope in that?
To date, what ERIC has done is it's pulled data from government data sets. But it is designed so that it could also pull data from private sector lists. And in fact, the analysis that I offered you, which suggested how many errors there were in our lists, was possible because of external analysis and lists that have been created outside of government.
So in terms of using the private sector to outsource the most sensitive of all matters, which is your electoral franchise, I think we need to have a degree of confidence that the public must have. Now, it's already happening in certain aspects of government service provisioning. If you look at the handing out of visas for travel to India, this is already being outsourced to the private sector. Passports processing. So these are something that would have been considered unthinkable a decade or so ago. They're beginning to happen. But we need to build the capabilities and, equally importantly, build the confidence in the public that this will be a glitch-proof, tamper-proof system.